Hello, and how's it going, everyone? It is Skullzi here with the latest and the greatest gaming news. Today I'm going to be breaking down a recent crazy situation that Bethesda seems to have accidentally gotten themselves involved in, as this is something Bethesda is on the hook for even though they weren't initially even involved in the first place, as a new studio that they just acquired is currently getting sued for over $100 million, and this lawsuit seems like it's built upon a pretty solid case. As always, we'll be breaking the situation down together, that way we can figure out what the situation really means for Bethesda Softworks and just how liable they would be if this lawsuit didn't go in their favor, as $100 million is a pretty huge chunk of money, and if they lost that much in a lawsuit, that would be a pretty big blow to Bethesda. Definitely not enough to cause them to go out of business or start canceling Starfield or anything like that, so don't start getting worried. But that is surely enough to cause them to reconsider the recent acquisition of Human Head Studios, who are the actual defendant in this lawsuit. The complete summary of the situation goes like this. Human Head Studios was contracted by publisher Ragnarok to make Rune 2. If you aren't familiar with the first Rune game, it was a third-person action-adventure game that focused on the conflict between the Norse gods Odin and Loki, obviously involving Norse mythology and lore. I've never played the first Rune game, but it was released back in 2000, and it gained a pretty solid cult following, so there was a lot of people excited for Rune 2. The exact details of the Rune 2 contract between Ragnarok and Human Head aren't completely known, but it is known that Ragnarok was paying Human Head Studios on a milestone basis, meaning Human Head would be paid after hitting certain milestones of Rune 2's game development process. Apparently, at some point in 2019, Human Head started having internal issues due to mismanagement that led to delays in meeting these development milestones for Rune 2, thus leading to extensions and changes to the milestone payment system, which inevitably led to Ragnarok paying Human Head Studios even more money for less work, and still not getting the game done on time, and thus eventually leading to Rune 2 being cancelled. Because shortly after all of this, Human Head Studios decided to completely call it quits in the middle of their Rune 2 contract with Ragnarok and began to shut down their studio entirely. This is when Bethesda Softworks stepped in and offered Human Head Studios the chance to move their studio over to Bethesda, which most of the staff of Human Head Studios did, changing the name from Human Head to Roundhouse Studios in the process, which is kind of shady to put it lightly. Not on the half of Bethesda, but obviously on the half of Human Head and their staff, or at least the executives and management of Human Head Studios. This explains why there is mismanagement in Human Head, because if they're willing to do something shady like this and just abandon Ragnarok in the middle of a big contract, I wonder what else they would do. And obviously, once Ragnarok Publishing heard about all of this, they probably weren't too happy, because they immediately filed a $100 million lawsuit against the ex-staff members of Human Head Studios, as well as demanding any and all assets and game code for Rune 2. And one real quick legal note here: even though Human Head doesn't technically exist anymore, a company can still seek out ex-company members of a recently closed company in order to carry out a lawsuit like this. That is totally legal and legit. And another thing that is totally legal and legit is when a company acquires another company, they then acquire the responsibility for any and all company debt and future lawsuits. Meaning technically by law, Bethesda is responsible for this $100 million lawsuit against Human Head if Ragnarok ends up winning, which they have a pretty good chance of doing. If Ragnarok does win, Bethesda could very well have to pay up on behalf of the somewhat shadily renamed Roundhouse Studios, but this would all depend on the exact wording and specific terms of the lawsuit. One important update though: Roundhouse Studios did hand over any and all assets and code for Rune 2 to Ragnarok, thus satisfying one major part of the lawsuit requirements. However, Ragnarok never stated that they would drop the $100 million portion of the lawsuit if they ended up getting Rune 2's assets, so it is unknown at this time if they will drop the remaining monetary portion of this lawsuit. They haven't yet, and as of this time, they haven't released a statement either. Bethesda Softworks also hasn't released a statement regarding the situation as well, and to be honest, Bethesda is probably pretty pissed off that they are dealing with the situation in the first place, and that they're looking down the barrel of a $100 million lawsuit that they literally had nothing to do with until they acquired Human Head Studios. And on top of all of this, I'm sure Ragnarok Publishing wants to recover whatever money they paid Human Head during the time of Rune 2's development, which may very well be why they haven't dropped the $100 million portion of this lawsuit quite yet. However, in my opinion, I don't know if Ragnarok would have a high chance of winning this $100 million in a court of law, as they've recently received all of Rune 2's assets and code like I just said. and in essence that means they now have what they paid for, as they were paying per development milestone, and I am sure whatever state Rune 2 was left in when it was transferred over to Ragnarok in its unfinished state, that it was most likely matched up with the milestone development timeline payment agreement that Ragnarok had with Human Head originally. However, if Human Head ended up getting paid more for less work due to the delays that they suffered internally from mismanagement issues, then that could lead to more credibility for this $100 million portion of this lawsuit, and Ragnarok may just win after all, putting Bethesda and ZeniMax potentially on the hook for $100 million freaking dollars for something they literally had no initial involvement in. This is a huge chunk of money, and it's hard to say just how big of a blow this would be for Bethesda, and if any internal projects would end up getting cancelled as a result. In my opinion, probably not. If Bethesda did end up losing, yes, this would be a big monetary blow against them, but I don't think it would, critically hit them in any potential financial way. I just think it would take away from the gigantic amount of money they have sitting in their bank accounts, because contrary to popular belief, I believe ZeniMax and Bethesda is doing just fine, because Skyrim alone grossed over $1.5 billion, which is way more than it took to actually develop and publish that game, so Bethesda is doing fine just based on all that Skyrim money. And in my opinion, Ragnarok has every right to carry out this lawsuit, as it is kind of shady that Human Head decided to quit developing Rune 2 in the middle of their contract with Ragnarok, only to relocate their studio under a different name, with the majority of their staff members under Bethesda Softworks. At this point in time, I think the situation could go either way though. Ragnarok does seem to have a decent shot at winning this $100 million, although pursuing it is still a risk that could end up costing them court fees and lawyer payments, since now that Human Head is under the wing of Bethesda, Bethesda would most likely decide to use their massive lawyer army to defend their newly acquired studio, making the situation potentially not worth the time and risk for Ragnarok, because Ragnarok, having recently acquired Rune 2's assets and code, may feel satisfied enough already and decide to call the lawsuit off in order to avoid facing Bethesda's attorneys and the long drawn out and expensive battle in court. Only time will tell how this situation will go though, but as always, I'll be sure to keep my eye on all of this and update you with any and all new information as it happens. Until then, what I want to know is, what do you think about all of this? Let me know down in the comments below, and if your comment wins the internet, I make it featured in a future video. If you enjoy the content, be sure to give the video a thumbs up. It helps the channel a lot more than you might think. And if you want to stay in the know when it comes to the latest gaming news, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to turn notifications on so you don't miss the latest uploads. Follow me over on Twitter for the latest channel updates. Come over to the official Skullzi Discord chat server, where there is always an awesome and active conversation and some speculation taking place. If you want to get some hype Skullzi merchandise, be sure to check out Loot Drop over on Teespring. And if you want to have your hand in providing future updates like this and getting access to unique and awesome awards, then consider subscribing to the community over on Patreon or joining the channel here on YouTube as an exclusive channel member. Links for all of these awesome things are down in the description below, and as always, thank you for watching. Be sure to tune in next time, when it turns out that Bethesda doesn't have an army of lawyers, they just have a bunch of people doing the Black Sacrament at all times. I guess that's one way to solve a problem.